Welcome to week 5 of Mobile Apps 2, Mobile App Portfolio 2. So this is going to be a lighter in-class lesson. So you can see the lesson plan there. We're going to cover a couple PowerPoints. We're going to talk about high performance teams and what norming, storming, and performing looks like as a high performing team. And then we're going to look at something called punting, which is part of the Scrum. It's an important thing to know because you might actually come across it. And then after that, I'm going to give you guys a chance, and I'll be available and online. And I want to kind of be involved in this. Is you guys are going to take about an hour to do a sprint planning meeting for your very first sprint this semester. So you guys are going to pick stuff from your Trello. You're going to show me your Trello boards and the stories from your product backlog that you want to pick for this sprint backlog. And then you're going to discuss why you're choosing certain stories. You're going to discuss who's going to take those stories and work on them for the 2 weeks. And remember, this is going to be what you guys are committing to for the 2 weeks of development. So I'm going to write the stuff down. We're going to have like a little brief at the end of each of your sprint planning meetings when you guys have fully decided what you want to do for those 2 weeks. And then I'm going to make a list or screen capture, whatever. And then each sprint at the end of the 2 weeks, I'm going to check in with you guys to see how if you finished those tasks or not that you wanted to commit to. So you want to pick enough that you're busy and you're working on it, but not too much that you have to do some punting, which we'll talk about later. But you also don't want to pick not enough that you don't finish your app throughout the semester. So it's a fine balance, and we're going to kind of get right into how you achieve that balance with this PowerPoint called High Performing Teams, or HPT. So let's just come down here. So a couple of these you can just read through on your own. Are these virtues you'd like to have? Why are we doing this in a team project? So some really good reasons why we want to do this in a team project. It's one of the most valued skills in today's job market. It helps to apply and synthesize knowledge in more complex ways. So you get actually deeper learning because you guys are learning with each other. And then you also develop an ability to problem solve collaboratively. So communication and dealing with diversity and conflict are all really good skills to have when you go into the workplace. So that's why a team project is so helpful. All right, so I want to ask this question, and then feel free to write this in chat or unmute your mic and answer the question. But have you ever been part of an excellent team? And think about the best team you've ever been part of. It can be a development team. It could be part of, if you play sports, soccer or football or whatever. But write down 2 attributes of that team that you found. What were 2 attributes? 2 attributes that made that team the best team that you've ever been a part of. Anybody? Nothing? Oh, there we go. Awesome, son. So he said goal oriented and cooperation. Those are great attributes. So goal oriented or completing the goal, Drew just said, an attitude of winning. Yeah, cooperation is huge. Cooperation, I think, can be tightly tied with communication. Um, and yeah, goal oriented, you know what you're going to work on, you know what you're going to finish. You guys have the same motives or the same goals. Yeah, totally. Awesome, son. Awesome, Drew. What about you guys, Rohan, Armin, Salman? How about you guys? 2 attributes of the best team you've ever been a part of. And Sun and Drew, what teams were those for when you guys did those?
Like the first attitude of winning was our cricket team,
Oh, nice.
and the completing the goal was from my bachelor's team that we have created one project in embedded programming. So that
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, very different, right? Like a cricket team versus development, but like two very important things. And it depends. If you're a sports team, obviously you want to win, right? Attitude of winning can still kind of be applied to programming, but maybe in a different way because it's not an actual sport. Rohan said teamwork and trust. Trust is huge. Yeah, trust is huge. Teamwork, yeah, totally. If you're going to be part of a team, cooperation and collaborative environment, said Salman. That's a good one too. So we had cooperation by Sun Fam, so very similar there. You guys are on the same page. Collaborative environment. That's an interesting one because we're all working online and remote right now, right? So um, you'd think it would be very collaborative because you've got all these tools that you can go online, but you're still at home, so you can relax. But sometimes when you're in the office and you've got that space, like I worked at a place where the walls were literally just all whiteboards, like or chalkboards, and you could just pick up a marker or whatever, and the entire wall, and you just sort of start writing stuff. And it was like one of those like tech places like Google kind of thing, right? Where everything is like you would just walk around and there's just code on the walls and stuff, and people are just meeting in the hallway and like discussing ideas. And the collaboration you can get in an environment like that is really, really cool. So sometimes that I would say that's even better than remote. But yeah, awesome. Thanks, Salman. Thanks, Rohan. What about you, Armin? If you get a chance, it'd be cool to hear what you think. All right, so now I want you guys to think about the worst team you've ever been a part of. What made it a poor performing team? Write down 2 to 3 attributes as well for this one. The worst team you've ever been a part of. And then there's just like a little comic here if you wanted to read it, but he's saying the downsizing will be handled in the most humane way I could think of. I hired a giant dung beetle to roll the poor performers into a ball and out the door. And then you just see, I can't get the marketing ones to stick. They keep sliding off. It's funny. Okay, cool. So we've got a couple coming in the chat here. Lack of time management, for sure. So say you have a deadline and then you lose track of time. That's a terrible attribute to have on your team. Yeah. It can increase the workload. Yeah, for sure. Conflict of thoughts. Yeah, so if you're literally just not getting along with each other, or there's not that like mesh or that trust maybe that you were actually talking about earlier. So that makes sense. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you need to be able to actually collaborate and share your thoughts. And I think that's a big part of a team is actually being able to hear everyone out. You're not just shutting everyone down, right? You're not um, if someone says something and that's just like, nope, we're going to do it this way, then it's just like a one man show. And, like we have governments set up in a certain way with democracy and stuff so that people have their voices heard. Just like a, it's not just like a dictatorship where one person gets to make all the rules. But yeah, those are great ones, guys. If anyone else thinks of some, then that'd be cool. If some of the worst uh, or poor performing teams you've been a part of, what do those attributes look like? All right. So moving on. 5 dysfunctions of a team. So this is something made by someone called Patrick Lencioni, and he's put together 5 things that are kind of dysfunctional or cause dysfunctional teams. And there's a couple of the ones that you guys have said in here, like Rohan, you said absence of trust. Um, so that we can see is the very foundation of this pyramid. So you need to have trust for your team. So the next one going up would be fear of conflict, which someone was saying. Rohan, you also said conflict. Lack of commitment kind of relates to the time management one, but like not actually committing that you're gonna do, or what you're gonna do, or you say you're gonna do something but you don't. So like for the sprint, you commit to making these 5 user stories and then none of them get finished. Lack of commitment. And avoidance of accountability is a big one too, because if no one's keeping each other accountable, if you have your Scrum leader, or your Scrum master, and he's not actually keeping people accountable, or people don't want to stay accountable to him, then that can be a problem too, because then you don't know what's going on. And then the last one, inattention to results. So that's just being lazy. You're just, making sloppy code. You're submitting stuff with errors and bugs. Yeah. So here we kind of get into them a little bit more, but the absence of trust, how to combat it. Like you're just not allowing yourself to be vulnerable or dependent on your team. Fear of conflict is avoiding constructive, passionate criticism. So sometimes criticism we have to allow, right? It can be difficult, but sometimes we have to hear that. Lack of commitment is a lack of buy-in or poorly defined tasks prevents the team from following through on their decisions. Not confronting members on poor behavior. So you may have a couple members in your team um, where they're not actually contributing, and it's not fair because a couple people are pulling their weight and a couple people aren't doing anything. You need to confront it and you need to say like, hey, this isn't fair. You're not actually coding or you're not actually doing anything. We need to actually do better and actually address those things.
As you can see, sir, that I am the only member from my team right now in this lecture.
Yeah, right.
So yeah.
So yeah, and that can be a difficult thing, right? Because now you need to tell the rest of your team what's going on, and I'll be emailing people just to make sure that they're actually coming or coming to the classes that matter. But yeah, for sure, you can have a difficult thing when the accountability is not there. So throughout this semester, you'll encounter some of these things, and that's okay that you encounter these things. I think it's actually good if you encounter some of them because if you have them here, and I know you guys are friends and stuff, but if you encounter them here, you'll be prepared for when it happens in the real world, when you go to your job and there's some conflict. And I think if you start practicing dealing with some of those accountability or avoidance issues, then you'll actually get a bit of practice for how to deal with it in the real world and, standing up for yourself. So like if you're the only one coming to class, you say like, hey guys, I went to class and we talked about teamwork and none of the team was there. The last one, inattention of results. Success of the team suffers when you focus solely on your own success, goals, and status, and not actually helping the rest of the team get those results. Cool. So this is kind of something I mentioned earlier this morning. Another person named Tuckman, he was another guy who really did a lot of studying with teams and teamwork and the collaboration. He came up with something called the stages of group development. And there's kind of four stages here. So you've got your very beginning stage, which is forming. So you're forming the team, which we've kind of just done, and we're about to have our first sprint. I would say we're all in this stage right now. We're all forming still. I know you guys were teams last semester, and so maybe you guys have had some of these already. And you can go from one point in this development stage and go back a step or forward a step. It kind of switches throughout time. The next stage is kind of storming. So maybe Rohan, maybe your group is storming right now because you're there, but they're not. And so you're going to be like, it's just like this unsettled kind of, not that you're fighting or anything, but it's just like a storm, right? Like it's just not everything is normal. That's the next stage. The next stage is norming, where you're normal, everything's normalized, you're working together, you're kind of getting your groove on. And then the last stage is performing, where you're going above expectations, you're in the groove with people, when someone's got a little bit of slack or they can't finish their work, other people are picking it up and there's over contribution and people are trusting one another, and it's just like this really beautiful thing. And what I was talking about earlier with those things of the best teams you've ever been on, so you might have experienced that there, where you're performing as a team and everyone is jiving. On sports teams, this can happen, and you can just tell when a team is just on fire, right? So yeah, you might go through some of these cycles, and that's okay through that. And you can read a little bit more about these here. So awesome. So we've got the forming page here. Relatively comfortable and peaceful, right? Everyone's just becoming a member of the team. Members are busy with routines, but little's actually getting done as there's not too many things that have to be agreed upon for goals. So that's probably the stage we're at right now. We're just going to have our first sprint meeting. A lot of interpersonal interaction to learn about each other. You're just becoming a group. So that's what that one is. The storming phase here is you're more open in expressing your opinion. So there's more confrontation. Some cliques may form if it's a bigger group, right? If it's like 10 people, you may have like two or three people that are the developers, and then you might have like a couple of the designers that click together, and then you kind of have these groups that form. There's clarity is on goals, but the team still needs to resolve some emotional issues or intrapersonal conflicts, right? So that can happen in the storming phase. Reliance on the leader is very heavy in this phase, but less than the forming stage. So it's always important to have a really strong presence for your leader in this phase. Some teams leave this stage quickly, which is a great thing, and hopefully you guys do if you guys are going through this stage. Other teams never leave, right? You might just always be storming, and some teams, maybe you just have to find different members, out in the real world when you have a job and you have a team, maybe they just, they hire different people so that the team doesn't storm. The norming phase is basically there's consensus and the team's all on the same page. There's a common goal. You guys all commit to the goal. This is a great phase, right? There's the roles and the responsibilities. They're clearly defined. So you know who the leader is, you know who's doing what tasks, and the leader's role is more facilitation rather than direction. So in some of the other phases, the leader might be like, hey guys, we need to do this or this or this. Whereas now everyone kind of knows their tasks and the leader can kind of like sit back a bit and be like, okay, are you doing this? Great, check. Are you doing this? Great, check. And they don't have to be on everyone's case as much. Cool. The last stage, which was performing, this is known as a high performing team, which is what this entire PowerPoint's about. So HPT, high performing teams, they are basically like one cohesive single unit. Everyone is, doing stuff autonomously. They know everything that's going on within the team. There's little supervision because they're doing things on their own. Autonomously means like you're doing it without being told or without being asked. You know what's expected of you, and you're taking your own ownership over what you have to do. Teams know what it's doing and why. The members are highly motivated and aim towards one achieving goal. The disagreements are dealt with in a constructive way, so you can hear people out, you can communicate and resolve quickly, and you guys have each other's back. So that's the place we want to get to in the semester, but hopefully we do. We'll see. So are we a high performing team? You can ask yourself this. Here's a picture of the Canadian Olympics hockey team because they won the gold there. Here's a quote: "If the people don't want to come out to the ballpark, nobody's going to stop them." So if you're not a high performing team, people aren't really going to want to watch you if it's sports, right? So make sure you have clear tasks, right? Team B knows they're all looking at this goal. Whereas team A, they might think, oh, we're doing this week, we're doing this week, we're doing this. You should have one clear defined goal. Everybody's on the same page. We're getting this and this and this done. And that's what you're focused on. And you're not going to get distracted by anything else during that sprint, right? So what makes a high performing team? How do we get to that point? Before I go on this slide, what are some thoughts on that, guys? How can we, as individuals, bring the best to our team so that we're a high-performing team? Right? So ownership and responsibility. That's the first one. That's a big one. Alignment to a clear task. So you have a user story or a card and you commit to that. And it's like you put your name on that in Trello on the board and it's like, that's mine, right? You can confront people, not in a bad way, but like if you're having a problem with someone or someone didn't pull their weight, you actually maybe message them or call them up and say like, hey, you said that you were going to get this done and you didn't get this done. So the confrontation is important because if people get away with something and then they don't get called out on it, they're just going to keep getting away with it. If there's no consequence to their action, they're going to continue to just slack or not code. So having that ownership, that responsibility, and striving for self-improvement, always wanting to do better or be better at what you're doing. Eager to share knowledge. So if you find like a really helpful website or something or a really helpful design program, you share it with the team. Peer accountability, kind of similar thing to the confrontation thing. And then agreement, fundamental basis for human relations. So really it's what makes a high performing team is the same thing as like what makes you a really good person for having a relationship with in terms of just fundamental basics for human interaction. Sometimes, and you can do this if you want. I'm not going to make this mandatory, but if you feel the need for this, you can make a team contract, and it's sometimes useful for dealing with potential conflicts. So basically, you would make a sheet of paper with clear outlines on it, meeting times and locations, how to handle if someone's sick, Communication channels, so what you guys are going to use to communicate. Conflict resolution, so if there's a conflict, who are we going to talk to? What are we going to do? Are we going to have a vote? Are we going to have, the group leader make the decision at the end of the day? Are we going to have those two people have a conversation, and then once they make the decision, then that's what the team does? How are we going to deal with conflict? And then work locations. Are we okay with people doing remote? Are we wanting to meet up in person once a week at someone's house? Are we wanting to go to the library at Georgian and work on it there? Do we want to book out a meeting room or a classroom once a month? Make those commitments, and then everyone signs this contract at the bottom, and then you bring this up when conflict happens, or if someone's not coming to meetings, or if someone is sick. You bring this up and you say, hey, look, you signed right here. You signed this sheet and you signed this contract saying that you were going to do this. The rest of the team's following through. We need you to pick up your slack and meet us where we are, okay? Because we want to be a high performing team. So sometimes these team contracts are really, really helpful in that way. I would encourage you guys to do it if you think that it could be something that you use this semester. But I'm not going to go around getting you to hand them in. So if you want to make a team contract, you can draft one up there yourself, but I would suggest it is a good thing. I've done them in the past and they are pretty useful. So that's high performing teams. Any questions about that before I move on? No questions? All right, I'm going to end the recording here, and then I'm going to get into the second recording and I'll start a new video there.